When I started this podcast, I never really thought at some point in time that I'd be having a discussion based on a meme. Like, don't get me wrong, it's not like there's nothing to be picked up from memes and shit, and it's not like you can't find inspiration from everywhere. It's just usually whenever people pick on a joke and then decide to take inspiration and give some sort of lesson or some sort of conversation from it, it's usually some shit that makes it seem as though they can't take a joke and everything seems super serious to them and shit, which isn't really the case. It's just that in this particular situation, I felt like there's definitely something to be said about society today versus society like, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago and shit. Although, to give proper context to the exact joke itself and why I felt like there was something that had to be talked about, I kind of need to give a full breakdown of it, which I can't do without an intro, so welcome to the Breakdown Podcast, where I talk about love, sex, and relationships from a guy's perspective, as well as a bunch of other guy shit. The man on the mic is Sir Denver B. This is one of the shorter, less instrumentally, less edity episodes that I usually like to push out so that, I can give some of my thoughts while I'm on break. But with that said, the normal episodes resume after the next episode. So after episode 514, we go back to doing the typical episodes. But before we get there, I first want us to talk about a joke. Okay, can I really say that it was a joke? I think it was an attempt at a joke, but it sort of fell flat on its face because it didn't really hit the way it was supposed to hit. So it was actually a reel that was put out by this page called Gaventura Capital, which is supposed to offer daily motivational videos so that it can push you towards, creating a wealthy mindset and shit. Whatever the fuck that's supposed to mean. Now, these guys put out a statement. It was based off of the song by Timbaland featuring Carrie Hilson, which came out back in around 07-08, called The Way I Are. And these guys said, and I quote, "Let's not forget that in 2007, this man and this woman came together and sang a song that went, the man says, I am broke, I can't buy you anything, I can't take you anywhere or give you princess treatment, but I have a huge D and I'm willing to give you all of it. Then the woman says, yes, I'm cheap, I don't value my time, effort, energy, labor, or emotions. I'll take the D because that's all a woman needs to feel loved. And we all danced to it for over a year. Shame on us." End quote. Now, these guys were talking about the song The Way I Are, and okay, as someone who came up on this song and actually liked it because it was like a proper radio hit back then, I did not like how these guys were talking about it. Like, I know I shouldn't be taking a joke so seriously. It's just that that's not really what the song was about, at least, when I remembered it. But you know what? Considering whatever it is that these people are saying about it, I might as well just read the lyrics myself because it's not like it's that hard. So I decided to go to Spotify, have a look at the lyrics. And actually what Timbaland says is, I ain't got no money, I ain't got no car to take you on a date, I can't even buy you flowers, but together we'll be the perfect soulmates. Talk to me, girl. Of which Carrie Hilson says, oh baby, it's alright now, you ain't got a flaunt for me. If we go Dutch, you can still touch my love, it's free. We can work without the perks, just you and me, thug it out till we get it right. Then now the chorus comes in and they're like, baby, if you strip, you can get a tip cause I like you just the way you are. I'm about to strip and I'm well equipped. Can you handle me the way I are? I don't need the G's or the car keys, boy. I like you just the way you are. Let me see you strip. You can get a tip cause I like. Okay, now I'm just gonna stop it there. And here's the thing. The only part where Timbaland mentions his dick is the part where he says that he's well equipped and asks if you can handle him the way he is. Like, the rest of the time, we are not hearing anything about man's dick. This is quite literally a song just saying, you know what, look, I don't got cash like that, I'm not balling like that, I'm not really doing all that great, but, can we work something out? And Shorty's like, yeah, sure, why the hell not? And on top of that, you can clearly hear the babe saying, look, you don't have to have a bunch of money. You don't have to have, a bunch of cars and shit. We can just come through together and, we'll just see how we can make stuff work. And, we can always come up. Like, that as a sentiment, especially back then, was perfectly normal and actually considered to be a pretty good idea of what a woman is supposed to want from a guy at the time. Like, during that time, I don't think women were all about, if it's not this, then I don't want it. If you can't take me here, if you can't do this for me, I don't do pizza and I don't do like, babes weren't like that back in the day. Like, fine, yes, there were certain standards whenever it came to take your babe out on a date, but the whole idea of cost sharing, the whole idea of understanding that, you know what, I don't have cash like that, wasn't seen as a bad thing. Like nowadays, as a guy, you approach a babe and you're like, look, I don't have cash like that, but I still want to be with you. My nigga, you're not going to land the babe. You're going to get dropped real quick. Like, there's a certain level of realism that I kind of miss from like the early 2000s and like the 90s and way back in the day. Like, there was a certain virtue that came with that kind of honesty and realism where it's like the guy is confident enough that he wants to be with you, but he is also realistic enough to say that he's not at the level that you'd probably want him to be at. And, you know, that realism would also come with the idea that, you know what, if he knows that he's here, then he's probably trying to work to get himself somewhere else. And I'd like to think that that realism is actually what got a lot of people into a lot of relationships that are probably still running pretty strong till today. It's the kind of realism that told us the kind of babe that we should want to be with. Is it a babe that just wants you for the money or not? Like, that sort of realism, I tend to think, made stuff simpler in the dating market back then, because it clearly showed what it is that someone was interested in and whether they'd be interested in you, as opposed to today where it's like stuff is just so complicated, and the people that claim to be good girls, you don't know if they are or they aren't. The ones that claim to not be good girls, you don't know if they are or they aren't. Like, at the end of the day, it's like there's this mishmash of qualities and attributes that are both good and bad that just make it so much harder to figure people out. And most of this just came up when people decided to go for the provider fantasy. The whole idea that, you know, the man has to be able to cater for all of these things and I should not contribute a single dime. You know, this guy has to be willing to spend money on me so that he can show that he loves me. Like, that sort of consumerism, that sort of, I don't want to say materialistic desire for a mate, but sort of individualistic yet slightly capitalistic, you know, desire for love, you know, to come along with these particular desires that, you know, you would want for your dreams to be filled. Like, I've never really understood that in today's day and age. And I honestly think most of this just came up when people stopped valuing realism and they started focusing on the idea of selling the fantasy, selling the dream. You know, the idea that this guy has to be the type that's a full-on provider that's supposed to make sure that all your bills are sorted. And at the same time, he's supposed to be the guy that will get you the stuff that you can brag about on IG or, you know, that you can talk about with your friends to show how great of a guy he is. Because, you know, he always makes sure that you're taken care of and you get this thing that people like to call princess treatment. Whatever the fuck that is. People got to a point where that was more valued than giving the realistic idea that, you know what, this is what I have, this is what I'm doing right now, and, you know, this is where I'm working towards, you know, is it something that we can work with together? Nowadays, people look at that and they're like, nah, you're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to give the fantasy. And, you know, you have to promise her shit. You have to buy her shit. And you have to treat her a certain way. Otherwise, she'll just go for a guy that can do more for her that probably makes more than you. Like, this idea that's constantly being peddled around that you have to offer this fantasy and give this sort of princess lifestyle to people. Like, I've never fully understood it. And, you know, this whole provider princess treatment type fantasy is honestly a little too overblown. And honestly, I want to blame social media for this. And yes, social media has played probably the biggest part in amplifying it. But it's even worse that there's more and more people that are accepting that and they're trying to look for that. And that's what they're looking to as like a dating ideal and as a dating standard, not even just an ideal. Like, at least an ideal, you can look at it and be like, you know what, that's what the idea of perfect is. Let me try and aim for something close to that. But there's a lot of people that are aiming for that as a standard. So it's like bare minimum or close to bare minimum, which is just sad. You know, it's honestly quite sad. And you see that and you hear that not just in a lot of what people say today, but even in the songs. You listen to the songs that people are singing these days. It's not about, you know, the sort of realism that could come with dating. It's this aspirational, fictional idea of a king and a queen, or a king that wants to make a baby's queen and, you know, live a bunch of life. And a guy that's working and he becomes a king so that he can go and elevate his queen and shit. Which, honestly, by all means, it's great as a fantasy, it's great as an ideal, and it's great as a dream, but in reality, most of the average guys aren't kings. Like, that would make too many fucking kingdoms, and the idea of being a king would sort of get diluted. But how many guys can really achieve that, And when I look at it, I could start backtracking, the rise of these problems all the way back to Destiny's Child and TLC when they were busy talking about bills, bills, bills and no scrubs and shit. But either way, like, we're at this point where it's like people now have become so fixated on the idea of living a much better life with a partner and them sort of financing it or making that happen. And it's like everyone is just playing a value game, which is pretty sad. Like, people were in it because they believed in having a better life together. Nowadays, it's like people believe in having a better life together with the most valuable person because they provide the most value right now. Like, that value right now versus value for longer is becoming this thing where it's like everyone wants the value right now, but people aren't looking at the value for longer. They're assuming that the value that's there right now is going to be the value for longer and it can only get better. They don't assume that it could ever get worse. Which is something, if you talk to people that are much older than us, younger people, the older millennials and like the Gen X's and shit, like they'll tell you for a fact that that's not how life works. Like sometimes you're at the top, sometimes you might be at the bottom, sometimes you'll probably be at the middle, but it's not like you'll always be at the top. And I see this with a lot of my colleagues. So I work in a department where it's like 80, 88, probably even 90% female. And, a bunch of these women, some are old and divorced and separated, some are old and married, some are single, some are, young and single, some are young and married with kids and shit. Like, there's a bunch of different women. And the thing is, I normally don't hear a lot of the older women saying that, you should prioritize making money and then getting a babe and having kids. They're like, just go find a nice babe and get some kids. Like, they maybe save for one woman. Like, they are usually the ones who are like, you just go and get a fine babe, start having some kids. Like, you're a young person and you should build yourself and shit, but, don't forget to have a family. Like, it's a pretty good thing. And interestingly enough, it's the younger babes who are like, I want to make sure that I build myself to a certain degree before I start having kids and shit. And the interesting thing is that the people who have kids and the older women, they don't look at that like it's that big of a thing. They're like, just have some kids. I remember I was busy having a talk with my colleague who's round about my age. She has a couple of kids, another one on the way and shit. And, she was busy talking about, Denver, when you have kids and all. And I was busy just making pull-out jokes like I normally do. And at some point, she's like, Denver, you're still going to get them, right? And I was like, nah, I first need to stack my money up. Then she looks at me as she's busy smiling and she's like, Denver, there's no point at which you're going to feel like you're going to have enough money, right? Like, you might as well just start having the kids. Like, life usually sorts itself out. And at the time, I was like, this shorty is bugging. But the more I think about it, the more I look at a bunch of the different guys around me, the ones that are having kids, the ones that are getting married and everything, I start to realize that she's right a lot more than she's wrong. Like, you don't need to be stacking so much cash to get kids and have a good life. And also, it's not like you having money is going to free you from struggle. Yes, it's going to eliminate a bunch of them, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you will be free of all struggle. There's going to be other struggles when you have money. Is it better when you have money? Yes. But does it mean that you can't stack money after you have kids? No, that's not exactly the point. So all in all, in as much as women may not want the kids, like, who says that having them with a guy that isn't a millionaire is a bad thing? Which kind of leads me to my conclusion in this entire thing, which is, like, there's nothing wrong with wanting a guy with means. There's nothing wrong with wanting a guy that makes money. But maybe you wanting a guy with money shouldn't come in between you actually wanting to be with a guy that you can actually do life with. Because when you kind of think about it, the guys that are out here, the vast majority of them aren't stacked with cash like that. But there's a lot of them that would make for great life partners with or without the money. And you could argue that I'm saying all of this because maybe I don't have stacks of money like that, but at the same time, I know the vast majority of guys that are out here also don't have that much, and the small set of guys that do, you can't exactly say that all of them are going to be great life partners. So maybe you should give some of the non-millionaires a chance and see how that goes. Or, maybe this is just me speaking up for guys that don't have cash like that because I don't have cash like that. And maybe if I get money, probably I might be saying a different thing. So I'm probably wrong. Either way, I want your thoughts on it. The DMs are open. On IG, it is at the Breaktime_podcast. On Facebook, it is at the Breaktime Podcast. And on X, it is at Bagaka the D. Thank you so much for listening all the way till the end, and I will catch you guys on the next break.